Good afternoon, everyone. The time is 4 p.m. You are listening to KMNR 89.7 FM, broadcasting out of beautiful Rolla, Missouri. And it's time for the Weather Report with MC Stratus, your one-stop shop for all the news and opinions that you need. As always, the views expressed in this program are not those of KMNR, the University of Missouri System, or the University of Missouri Board of Curators. Now, folks, we have a very special episode, continuing in our series of interviews with local movers and shakers, candidates for local office, and we are sitting down with mayoral candidate Lister Florence. Lister, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we have a lot to cover, so we will dive right in. But as always, if you have anything you'd like to say to the candidate, please text in to 504-656-6735. That's 5046-KMNR-DJ, and we might read it on air. And my quick plug, one last thing, we're drawing very close to the voter registration deadline to be able to vote in the April 7th municipal elections. That deadline is March 11th. If you are not registered here in Rolla by then, you cannot vote. So do consider registering to vote here in Rolla. As a student, you are entitled to vote in Rolla. You sleep here, you can. Just go to voteroutreach.sos.mo.gov. Which is the Missouri Secretary of State's website. So, we'll dive right in, Lister. You are running for mayor. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Lister Florence, and I've been in the Rolla community for 40 years. I came here in 1986 to go to the university, and when I graduated, I started working here at USGS Geological Survey. My first degree was in civil engineer, and after I started working at USGS, they informed me that they needed some programmers. And I told them that my background was in civil engineering, but I told them that any engineer has the ability to learn complex subject matter. So if you can give me the time and the resources, I can learn to be a programmer. And they said, well, deal done. So they sent me back to school to become a programmer. And that's where I got my second bachelor's in computer science and my master's in information science and technology. My children were raised in this community. I got married in this community. I do a lot of volunteering when it comes to like the Optimist Club, and there's a Gideon organization, and just I believe and like the community that I live in. So a couple of years ago, I decided to run for city council on top of everything else that we do in our community. And I won. Well, I ran unopposed, and so I guess I was going to say I won the election, but I won by default. Yes, and so I served on city council, and when I first came into the office, they put me to work immediately. The first thing they asked me to do was to serve on planning and zoning. I served on planning and zoning for a couple of years, and then I think it was the second or the third year I was unanimously elected by my peers to be the mayor pro tem. So I served as the mayor pro tem for 2 years, and then I got out of city council. My wife was deciding that she wanted to go back to school and get her master's degree in counseling. And I just want to be extremely supportive of her because she's always been so extremely supportive of me. And so I got out for a couple of years, and I really feel that I'm driven to come back and serve in this capacity and as being the mayor. So that's a little bit about me. I'm originally I was born in Germany. My father was in the Air Force, and I was raised in southeast Missouri, a little tiny town called Charleston, Missouri. So, yeah, that's a little about me.
And for the unenlightened listeners, Mayor Pro Tem, can you talk a little bit about what that position is?
Mayor Pro Tem is that you act basically as a default whenever the mayor is not able to act in the capacity of the mayor. And that is voted on and nominated by the city councils and your peer. And so usually it's a 1-year term. And so every year, you'll get another Mayor Pro Tem, or you get reelected as Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. So Mayor Lou Magnitz, the current mayor, who would be your predecessor if you're elected, has had well over a decade of experience on city council before he was elected mayor back in 2014. Now, comparatively, you have a lot less direct government experience. So you talked a bit about it. What other experience do you have that you feel is qualifying for mayor?
I think that the thing about me is that I know our community. I know my peers. I know how to bring people together. My positions of leadership have been in my job, where I've led various teams with diverse audience and diverse participants associated with that. Also, in one of my involvement with my church, I've had some positions of leadership that made me work with individuals inside the church, outside the church, and my involvement with the Optimist organization. I became quickly the club president, and after I became club president, I served as the governor for east half of the state of Missouri. After I became the governor of half the state of Missouri, I went on to be a VP, and VP was over 6 different states I ran that for about a year. And so in every entity and every organization I've been involved with, I've always kind of gravitated toward the position of leadership. And so what I do is I have the ability to learn complex subject matters and make it portable for people to be engaged and be involved. And so it's the same thing that's going to happen with this. And why? I don't have the experience, but just like anything that we know, if you give enough time and energy and you have the ability to understand, you can succeed at it. One of the things I plan on doing is retiring from my job. I've been there since 1992. And so I'm going to work full time as a mayor in our community. So that's the time commitment. I can really commit to learning. It's going to be a steep learning curve, but I'm committed to doing it.
And on that note of being a full-time mayor, and this is partly speaks to my ignorance of what all the mayor does. What does that get us? What would we be able to get from having a full-time mayor versus someone who is part-time, I guess?
I think we've been blessed in our community that we've had leadership who have typically came up through the city council. So it's almost like they've been like a grooming process. They can kind of transition into it. But this year, between me and whoever is going to get it, you've got someone who's going to take a leap that it's been in the office 3 years or for 4 years. And so we're going to lose a lot of institutional knowledge. On top of the mayor being gone, you've got the city administrator, John Butts, who has just recently retired, so we got a new city administrator. We also are going to get a new chief of police that's going to be coming into office. We're going to get I think we got a new director of Rolla Municipal Utilities. We've got a lot of changing facets. And so ask me the question again, Scott. I want to make sure that I answer.
What benefits do we get from having a full-time mayor?
The benefits you get is that you get someone who you're going to need, like I said, a steep learning curve. So you've got to have someone in the non-traditional sense where that person could kind of merge in and take their time a little bit. This person is going to have to be able to commit, I think, significant hours, and resources to learning the job on the job, no matter who comes in that position. So that's what I say about the full-time mayor job. Yes.
Okay, so because you haven't been in government for longer than I've been alive, being able to dedicate 40 hours a week lets you hit the ground running more.
Correct.
I get you.
Yes.
Cool. Still on the note of Mayor Magnets, what is something that you think he's done well that, if elected, you'd like to continue or replicate? And what's something he's done that you would want to go in a different direction on?
Mayor Lou has been a strong leader. I think there's been a consistency of his strong leadership across the board. And why that's been so important is that we have had, I guess, a pendulum swing in our city council.
Oh, yes.
It'll go. We don't have anyone, I don't think, who's been in the office more than 4 years.
Right.
And so you've got a lot of young people. You've got people, young in the sense of how much time they've been in that capacity. You've got a lot of people who sometimes have not had a lot of position of leadership in the community. And so they're learning, and it's a very young. And so we needed that type of strong leadership to kind of help guide them. You needed that consistency across the board year after year after year, that where we came from, how we got there, and how we're going to go forward. And that's something that Mayor Lou did an excellent job of doing that. The second part of this question is very, very difficult because you want to be very respectful of the people and what they've done and how they've done it.
Sure.
And you don't know completely why a person made the decisions that they made because you weren't there. You didn't have all the information pertaining to why they made those decisions. For me, though, one thing I would like to see us do, I would like to embolden and empower city council to act what I think is more in the capacity that they should. Sometimes it feels as though city council comes in and they make a vote, but it doesn't seem like they have full range of choices and decision what they want to be. It seems like it's kind of sometimes steered in a certain direction. So I'm more along the lines of educating them, getting them up to speed. I think that I really want them to be a part of MLL. I think we need to have an onboard process where we kind of orient them into the position. And so I'm about helping them to be better and giving them as much information as possible so they can make the best decision for them. And the same thing, I want to also give that information to the general public. I want the general public to be more engaged. I don't want them to feel as though they're somewhat separated from the decision-making process.
Okay, so kind of how I'm interpreting that is I've noticed a lot of time it seems like the city drafts most of the ordinances and just puts them before council and basically asks them to approve it. And so it's like council is less of a part of the process and more of just the last step the city has to go through to get its job done. And you might like to see council taking a more proactive role in shaping legislation, drafting legislation of its own, kind of directing the course of the city.
I think that's a general overview of what I'm trying to drive in, yes.
I gotcha. Now, in your campaigning, at least from what I've seen, you identify 4 big pillars backing your campaign, and that's transparency, accountability, safety, and strategic planning.
Yes.
And I'd like to dive into those a bit, kind of tease out some concrete details from that. So let's start with transparency and accountability. They sort of are interrelated. What does that mean to you? What would that look like under a Florence administration?
Both of those things are kind of strongly tied to the culture that the entity is living in. But the transparency part is that I think that we don't really know as a general public where we are and where we stand and you know, where our finances are going. So people have a general idea, but I don't know too many people that feels completely comfortable that they understand how our government operates, where our funding comes in, what does our budget look like. And so I think that you've got to do more things of sitting down with the general public and educating them on the level that they can comprehend and ingest. One of the things I like when I was in school is Jerry Dean Bayless. They call him Mr. Civil Engineer. And Jerry Bayless when I came to school, I did a wonderful job my first 2 years. And then I joined the fraternity and don't laugh. And for some reason or other, my grades slipped a little bit. You know, not other people, but my grades slipped a little bit.
I don't know how that happened.
And one of the things I had to do was go talk to Jerry Bayless about, you know, being readmitted back into school and the challenges associated with that. And Jerry Bayless pulled me to the side and said 2 really, really powerful things. The first thing he said is that I'm going to let you back in school because the first 2 years you did academically well. So I know that you have the capability of doing this and stuff. We know something has happened. And he said, but the second part is he said, you've got to learn how to fight for your education. And I said, I don't know what fighting for your education means, sir. Can you explain it to me? And he said, you were raised in Southeast Missouri. You're extremely respectful. He said, but you've got to understand when someone is a subject expert, it's their job, if you're capable of learning, to meet you where you're at and make the information portable. He said, you've got to force sometimes your professors to meet you where you're at and to educate you. And that's the same mentality I want to have as far as the general public around here. I want to be the subject expert. And if I'm not the subject expert and I can't explain it in a way, it's my job to make it portable to the general public to understand what the different departments are, where we are, so they can be a part of the decision-making process. That's the transparency, and that's the accountability.
It sounds kind of in the same vein as something Councilman Bill Hahn has been advocating for, is with our budget reports having information of this is how far along on these projects we are, how much we've spent, and how much more is left, as opposed to just being, oh, we're spending $30,000 on repaving, but where does that fit into the context of the budget as a whole? So moving on now to talking about safety. It's a pretty universally made point. No local candidate wants to say they don't support safety. So what does that look like to you, and what would you do to, I guess, bolster safety?
I think the first line of safety when I think about our community is our emergency response individuals, you know, whether it's the police department or the fire department. These are the individuals that are the hands and the feet. They have more interaction with the general public than probably any other entity on a day-to-day basis. And so when I think about the probably the tip of the spear associated that was the police department. And are you aware that we have the same number of police officers, generally speaking, as we had in the year 2000?
Oh, 2000.
Yes. And so the Census Bureau at that time, I think, was 15,000, is what the Rolla Public is. And I think that we've grown a little bit since the year.
A little bit, yeah.
We've grown a little bit since the year 2000. I think that the men and women who do that do a wonderful job. It's not that we just have to meet them. We've got to come along and say, you need the resources. We need more police officers. We need more policewomen. We need more individuals maybe on bicycles and stuff. I don't want to say that I'm trying to say a police state. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But I do want to make sure we emphasize that we are a growing community. And so we have to a certain degree, try to get ahead of where we're trying to go towards, as opposed to, I think, rotating tires. And so what comes along with that is educating the general public of where we're trying to go. I think that's what the key things I think about with safety is that we need to. I know when my children were here, I felt very, very comfortable with them. It still had that Mayberry type of feeling, and you can't really go back in time. You can't say you want to do that and go back and recapture what it is, but you can give people a sense that they feel though the fears and concerns that they have, that we are addressing them and that your voice does matter. And if you have a concern in a certain area, we're going to come alongside you and match that so you can see some type of improvement and you feel as though that it is being addressed. And so.
Okay. Because, let's just say, something a point of order. Crime is down. Okay. At least stats I have just go back to 2020. But every year, crime has decreased pretty substantially from 2020. And I don't have data before then, but I think that year just in every aspect was something of an outlier. And so that's not to say that, we don't need more police regardless, but...
I can see your point on that. I think that... so you have the metrics and the numbers associated with it, but you also have to say, what is the feeling? And I haven't seen any data associated with people and taking a survey of how they feel, if they feel as though they're safer. Because, yes, the numbers may say that, but if you're feeling... Because... You know how it is. You're an engineer, so you know how number game can be played. And so, but if the numbers are decreasing, but people are feeling less safe, you've got to address why they're feeling less safe. Because the feelings are not matching from the perspective of the numbers of what the data is saying. So something's askew, and so we got to investigate and figure out what's the disconnect there, because something is happening.
Sure, but I guess not to be glib, but
no.
The hiring, real flesh and blood cops to resolve a ultimately feeling problem may not necessarily be the first way to go about it.
Okay.
If it's the perception of safety, that's probably not going to change just by having more police officers. Or, I'd go even further and say, we shouldn't be spending our tax money just based on how people are feeling. We should be rooting it in what the data are saying.
There's some validity to that, and I don't think that I'm trying to discount that perspective of it. I think there's one side to look at as possible solution, and I think that that's part of us sitting down at the city council and as a community saying, let's get input from everybody. Just because I have an ideal in a direction, I always give this example of, if you start on say that you told your children that I'm going to take you to the beach. And so you've given your word, we're going to go to the beach tomorrow. And you start off to go to the beach. But when you get to the beach, the whole shore is covered with jellyfishes. And so you're like, well, we can't go out on the beach. And they're like, no, you gave your word. You said we're going to go. Based off the information and data that comes into a situation, you're able to say, you know what? We have to change it. So if my assessment of us thinking that this is the answer, we're going to gather information, we're going to have conversation, we're going to listen to the police department, we're going to listen to the general public. And if my direction is not the direction that we think is going to address this feeling of safety, then we modify. But that's my direction on the outside right now, thinking that this is the direction I think that would be beneficial.
Okay. Yeah, I just think that, basing public policy on feelings, I'm sympathetic to it, but it can lead to some pretty dangerous conclusions. I think, you probably have a not insignificant number of people who would say, I'm not going to feel safe until we bus all the homeless people out of town or something like that. And so
I can see what you're saying.
Opinions like that you have to take with some amount of salt.
Absolutely. I can see that.
So the last point then was strategic planning. What are we planning strategically?
I think the concerns that I have when I say strategic planning is that we got an influx of so many different things that are coming in. We got the VA hospital, we have the Protoplex, we have the expansion of the hospital, we have some major housing development that is happening on Highway 72 in different places. We have growth in St. James. And so with all this growth that's coming, I hope that our school systems, I hope that our roads, I hope that our sanitation, I hope that all these things that, that govern and guide us and how our stand in life, I hope that we're equipped and ready to be able to handle it. And so I want to make sure that we're being proactive about where we're going. And so that's what I was talking about, that part of it. Yes.
Do you feel like the development thus far has been, I guess, lacking in this kind of strategic planning?
I don't feel as though it's been lacking. I know that one of the things that when in my experience and what I've seen is that if there's a plan, it hasn't been able to been. I've seen like the plan where we want to go, as a city and stuff, but I haven't seen how that is broken down, for those different departments I was saying, and how we see incrementally that those things are going to transition and grow with the growth that we're talking about going. When I think about like even with the university, and the university is ideal to expand and grow, I haven't seen how the city is going to be trying to address even housing associated that with the students. So those are my concerns about that, and maybe someone has that strategic plan and maybe it's being done. But when I try to find it and I try to educate myself to be a part of it, I haven't been able to find it and get an understanding of where we're trying to go. What is our map to try to get there, to build up the infrastructure for us to be successful when we get to that journey, when we get to that destination?
Well, we've got the revised comprehensive plan that is coming out that lays out sort of the city's plan for its development. And I know you've spent some time looking into that.
Yes.
And if elected, it's going to be, you're going to be responsible for getting that plan started.
Yes.
Were there any parts of it that stood out to you as, this is a fantastic idea, or areas you think we needed some more work?
That's a great question. I've kind of given it like the bird's eye perspective on it, but I haven't really dived down into the weeds and potatoes, of what really the plan is. So, no, I will have to do more time and more investigation in order to answer your question better. But no, I don't have anything off the top of my head that I can address and say these are some concerns that I have.
Okay. Right on. Well, folks, you're listening to the Weather Report here on KMNR. We are talking with Lister Florence, who is running for Mayor of Rolla. So don't miss this. Let's talk now about some more specific questions. Back to Mayor Liu. He has proven unafraid to use his bully pulpit to voice his opinions. And if he thinks the council is doing something dumb, he has not hesitated to tell them that. Do you see yourself taking kind of a similar approach with leading meetings, or will you act as more of a passive facilitator, kind of letting the council do its thing?
I'm laughing because you basically gave me two choices, between a bully and a passive. I know. That's why I was laughing about that. I'm a big proponent of Robert's Rules of Order. And so I really live and thrive about, the equity associated with that, of giving everybody equal opportunity to speak and voice their opinion. And even when I was Mayor Pro Tem, if you go back and watch how I ran the meeting and stuff, I like the equity of giving everyone their opportunity to speak. I will voice my opinion, but it's not my job to try to convince you of my opinion. It's my job to say If I'm thinking that there's information or that I think that is important to you to learn, for you to, or that you're not paying attention to, it's my job to tell you. And it's my job to tell you why I have this certain opinion. But in the end, you're held accountable to the constituents in your ward. And so your decision is your decision. And that's my style of leadership, is to empower people that they can make the best decisions that they can make for their constituents. And their constituents will hold them responsible, and that's what the voting process is all about.
Sure. Now, there's long been some tension, you could say, between the university and at least some residents of Rolla. And some areas of town, like Ward 5 in particular, have very dramatically been reshaped by the university's expansion. And there are some who feel that the city is kind of putting the university's interests ahead of theirs. So, as someone who is in both of those worlds, what are some things that we could do to ease those tensions and foster some more cooperation between the university and the public?
One of the things I've seen with Mo over the last 2 or 3 years is that he's really has emphasized to the Board of Trustees and to the leadership on the campus is that the university can't just be shining, glowing light on the top of a hill. It's it's really is almost a hindrance if the university is excelling, but the local community around it is not feeling the effects of the university's success. And so he's really been trying to integrate that and have a lot more meetings, from my perspective, with, the administration in our community. I've seen also different branches of the different departments in the university, interacting more with the community. And as you do things like that, the community starts to, when you roll up your sleeve and you're engaging with people, they see you for who you are. Another thing that I thought that the university really highlighted really well is when we had the tornado last year. And there was some frustration because we ended up having the safe pads.
Right. That was a whole thing.
A parade associated with that. And so every time that I hear from people and they're talking about, how frustrating that was and how the university doesn't have a feel for, what's happening in our community, I remind them, I said, did you look around and see how much of the university students were out that day, and professors working, driving around, and it's like, yeah, you have to refresh people's mind and say, you're right. The university is part of who we are. Those students and those professors are our neighbors, and it helps them kind of counterbalance, that mentality is us against them. Mm-hmm. We're all in this together. So I think the university is going in the right direction of trying to level that playing field. I think some of the things that they do too is like when you have like the sporting events, they will give tickets sometimes to the local youth organizations and stuff because they want the community to be engaged with the university life. And so those things, and if you plant those seeds in the children early, it's easy for you to capture the hearts of the parents and the community when you touch the lives of the children. And so I think the university is going in the right direction of healing that. And will you have some tension? You'll probably have something. But I do see the steps of us trying to improve that relationship.
And now you're actually a member of the University Board of Trustees.
Yes.
What would you say to voters who might say that you're a university plant or that is something of a conflict of interest?
I think that it could be a conflict of interest, but I think that I have a track record. Even when I was on city council, there was one particular issue that came up over and over again, and when there was even the appearance on my part of a conflict of interest, I removed myself from voting on those issues over and over again. And so that's the same thing that is happening in this capacity. I try to be aware of that. I try to listen to my constituents. I try to listen to the people around me, and because we all have blind spots. And so if I'm doing something that may be a contradiction or even the appearance of it, to remove myself from it, because first of all, you don't want to do anything like that. But second of all, you don't even want the appearance of that. So that's how I will handle that in the past, and that's how I'll handle it moving forward.
Follow-up question.
Yes.
What does the Board of Trustees do? Because I don't know this answer.
Great question. I think that the Board of Trustees basically operates in a sense of advisory. So the chancellor has a direction, and the chancellor has the goals that he wants to get, and so the board of trustee comes in and gives him industry feedback, of experiences from the different sectors that there are, and say, all right, have you considered this? And you may want to look at this. What the Chancellor Mo has done a really good job of is that he has broken down with the Board of Trustees. Typically, in the past, there's been the Board of Trustees come in twice a year, and you get feedback, you find out about the vision that we're going to go, and then you say, when I was in industry, we thought about this, and have you thought about looking at these metrics? And so you're more along the lines of advising. Mo has done a more excellent job, I think, of engaging the Board of Trustees, taking advantage of the expertise, and has them divided up into subcommittee. They actually are working with the professors and actually working with financial aid. And so we have been more engaged under this and working to present solutions with, the university to Mo, to the university, and being engaged more with students. So, yes.
Gotcha. Let's move on now to the question of homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tell you to have to present your plan to solve homelessness, though if you have one, by all means share it. But addressing homelessness can mean different things to different people.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean to you, and what are some measures from the city that you would support to do that?
I think that there's entities in our community that try to do a really good job of addressing, is it homeless? Sometimes they call it what? Dishoused or
unhoused?
Unhoused, yeah. And so I try
sometimes the more correct term, but
yeah. And so there's entities in our community that really do a really good job of trying to address that. I think that the city in the past has had this mentality of there's nothing we can do, and let the public entities, do whatever they can do. But this thing is growing, not just for our community, but as a nation. And so I feel as though the city needs to come in there and start working with these entities and collectively saying, here's a direction that we want to get done. I'm all for assisting. We all need assistance. Everybody needs assistance on some level and stuff. But what's the difference between assisting and enabling? I don't know. It's such a gray area of what that really, really is and stuff. But I know that I would love for us to be able to try to help individuals who want to be helped. And so I don't have a concrete plan of what that really looks like, but I do think that the city needs to sit down with all the entities that are involved with that, whether it's the police department, whether it's like the different entities in our community that provide services for the unhoused, or whether it's mental wellness, all these entities, if you can do, is bring them together and say, all right, what are we doing well? And what are the things that we're doing counterproductive? And how do we drive together? And you can't force, but you can orchestrate and lead and get people to come together and get an understanding as a city, this is the direction that we want to go. And we're not forcing you to, but we really would like for you to help us, and for we can put all of our oars in the water in the same direction and try to accomplish something more, as opposed to being, to a certain degree, counterproductive to the different efforts that people are doing.
And there are, policy directions that the city can take that really cannot be done by the mission or any private organization. I mean, at the most intense end, I guess, you're looking at direct city investment into constructing more housing or rent control, things like that.
Yes.
But even, the application of our zoning laws, you were on the planning and zoning committee, kinds of things that we can do to encourage more housing and more of the kinds of housing that someone coming out of homelessness would be able to use. And so if there's anything that comes to your mind in that area of it.
I really don't have an answer to that, but I'm willing to investigate and learn. One thing I did do is that a friend of mine, I went to L.A. Last fall, and one of the things that I did when I went to L.A. is that as I rode around, I went to the police department and I went to some of their encampments that they had and tried to figure out, so what are the solutions that you have? What are directions? What are the things that you think you did right? What are the things you did wrong? And so there was a couple of point of contacts that I was able to make in those lines. And that's something that we have to do here as well, is learn. and so I'm willing to do that, willing to roll up our sleeves and learn what works for different entities. And of course, the answer that it's not a cookie cutter answer that's across the board, but we've got to be proactive, as I said before, about we know this is here. Let's not try to pretend that magically the things are going to get better. No, we've got to chart the course of what we think better looks like.
You and I had very different LA vacations. I went to see the Hollywood sign.
Okay. Well, maybe yours was a lot more fun than mine.
Yeah. Now, one direct way that you have, as mayor, would have influence on city policy and on what the council does is through your appointments. So the city has all these different boards and commissions that generally just advise the council, and you're in charge of appointing people to them. So what would your approach be to selecting nominees for these different boards and commissions?
Is that of course, one of the things that I want to do is that I really want city council members to be more engaged in the different things. And so I would definitely have someone off city council, because when you're presenting something to city council and they don't feel as though they had any buy-in on the process and stuff, it's more challenging for them to kind of accept it. But if you have someone who's a part of them, that's part of that process of you trying to select someone, that person can kind of talk to the other city council members and say, this is why we went into this direction and stuff. So I really want to incorporate someone from city council, even in the process of when we're trying to find candidates to fill these slots. Second part of that is that you want to give the information to city council 2 weeks in advance. And I think we do that because it's read a couple of times, but sometimes things get rushed, and sometimes there is the appearance of inconsistency of how much information we do gather about the individual that we're presenting to city council for them to make decisions. And so I know one of the concerns that people have right now is that someone will get nominated for a position, and then they will get city council, for whatever choices they might want to make, will say, no, we don't want that individual. And I think you can maybe have a little vetting of that on a softer level. If you had someone from city council who was part of the process of who you're going to be nominating, and had a peek behind the veil, you probably can get a little bit feel, as opposed to waiting till you have the meeting. And I'm sure they probably have addressed this since then, but there's been times in the past that we actually at the meeting, and then it's almost like it's a shock that the person has received so much, pushback about the person being nominated. And that's just not a good feeling for us as a city. That's not a good feeling for the person being nominated. And so when you think about other candidates and they're thinking about going there, like, why would I do that? I saw what this person went through. And so I would like to do things that kind of adverts that. And I'm sure that they are doing things like that. But that's just what I've seen on the outside, is that I definitely would like to address that.
Very good. Once again, folks, you're listening to the Weather Report here on KMNR. We're sitting down with Lister Florence, who is running for Mayor of Rolla in the April 7th election. Let's turn up the heat a little bit. You quite wisely ducked out of city council before they took on a few pretty controversial issues.
Okay.
But you're not going to escape them. So I do want to get your take on a couple things that city council considered. I don't suspect these will come before the council, but they could. So first would be the removal of fluoride from the city's drinking water. If you had been on the council, how would you have voted regarding that?
I would have voted to allow fluoride to stay in the water.
All right. Any more to that, or just
no?
Right on.
Yes.
How about then the Sanctuary City for the Unborn ordinance, which, for context for our listeners, was effectively a ban on the mailing of a ban of medication abortions within the city. It would allow people to sue other folks who they believe are receiving medication abortion materials in the mail. If you were on council, how would you have voted on that?
My understanding is, and from a limited scope, because I didn't investigate it completely, but I would not have been for the sanctuary city. is my general. Of course, I'll be open to understanding and getting and reading to get a better grasp of that. But I think that's beyond what we're trying to do on the city council level.
Okay, because that's good to hear. I've been looking at city politics can often be light on policy, and so in looking at candidates, I try to evaluate everything, and that includes who is backing who, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And you've had some pretty outspoken support from folks like Josh Froman, who actually former city councilman who proposed that ordinance there. Mm-hmm. Karen Harris, who's the vice chair of the county Republicans and who tried to propose that same ordinance in Doolittle. Mm-hmm. Is there, would people be wrong to read some kind of ideological implications into that support?
I think that what I try to do is that I try to find the common ground. And with me, what I stand for is what I stand for. All of my friends, we have a common core beliefs of what we agree on. But then there's the standard deviation outside of that we don't agree on. And we can accept that is, I don't want any of my friends or you people around me to be a cookie cutter representation of me. If you agree on me on every subject matter, you'd be redundant. So you're supposed to have different viewpoints, but I can be respectful. And if you look at me and if you look at the way that my campaign is, if you come to any of our events, it's a little bit of everything. Mm-hmm. It is a wide spectrum of, some people say extremely liberal, some people say extremely conservative, and that's the type of leadership I am. I want to find the things about you that makes you uniquely wonderful who you are, and let's bring that into it and figure out what we can do to work together. We won't agree on everything. I don't agree with everything with any of my friends. Mm-hmm. That's their opinion. Here's the things we do agree on, and other things we don't agree on. So if someone looks at someone who I'm talking to and say, oh, you're just like that individual and stuff because you're having coffee and because you guys have association, I think that's that person's perspective to have that opinion, but I will hope that they will sit down and have a conversation, and look at the person for the merits of who they are and look at the history. I've been in the community for 40 years. And if you think that I am a cookie cutter of anyone else, I don't think that you've really done your due diligence to try to understand who I am.
Alrighty. Well said. Let's talk a little bit about the center. So this will also be another pretty defining aspect of your opponent Kevin Graven's term, whoever's elected. So first, the Phelps Health lease. Do you support that, or do you view it as kind of kicking the can down the road, not really getting us closer to a resolution?
I think that it's I guess in a short way, I support it. I think that we're trying to find solutions. We're trying to find direction. If we're trying to integrate this medical application associated with this, and using it as a facility that we can use as a hospital. And so there's nothing wrong with us exploring that direction. I have no problem with us trying to find solutions. I think that the thing that's associated with the center is there's a history that there's a misconception that people have and I think that from one way or another people have felt as though that it was going to be self-sustaining. Mm-hmm. And so whatever entity or how there that got out and there's general public that feels as though that. And if you look around at any other entity similar to that, they aren't. There's always been subsidized to a certain degree and stuff. And so I think now we're getting to the point that we all collectively and say that cannot happen. It cannot be sustainable like that. And so now we're trying to say the struggle is that people have a bad taste in their mouth. And so sometimes it's hard for them to think beyond where we should be going, how we're doing, because they're looking through the rearview mirror and saying, what about? Yeah. And I understand we need to assess that and get an understanding of how we got to this point. But to some point, we have to sit up there and say, okay, we're moving forward from this point forward, and let's roll up our sleeves and figure out what we're going to do going forward. And I think that the hospital is one of those situations that they're coming on board and we're trying to go forward. Is it a perfect answer? I don't know. but I know that they're trying to move in the direction. I know that the hospital is taking on a huge endeavor, you know, to try to come in and say this is good for our community, and we want to assist and be part of the solution. So I give them kudos for that, and I really want to support that effort of saying this is one of the entities in our community that is a strong statement of who we are. When we bring people to our community, it's a shining light that we always take people by and say, this is what it is. Kind of like our parks, and our trail. It's part of the fabric of who we are that makes us, to a certain degree, Rolla. So I want to see that thing as much as we can to continue to keep trying to find solutions. But I want to be fiscally responsible as well.
Mm-hmm. And regarding the half that is the city's problem, the swimming pool, it is looking like we're going to have some kind of tax initiative in order to keep that open. And the city is evaluating what changes could be made to the space or what uses there could be.
Yes.
So, I guess speaking more as a voter than as a mayor, what would your ideal answer look like? What would it take for you to support an increase in sales tax in order to keep the pool open in some aspect?
You remember before, and you asked me about the 4 pillars,
Mm-hmm.
and I talked about transparency and accountability?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the general public, in my understanding, because of some time I've been here, we have no problem with certain things if we feel as though the money is being spent the way that it was intended to be spent. And so if we're going to do something in that direction, I think that we have to make sure that we kind of open it up to as much as possible to a level playing field that all people in our community can be participating and be a part of the where we're going to go in direction. So if we're going to ask for a tax increase or we're going to ask for anything to subsidize it, we have to make sure that it is available to as much as the general public who can participate as possible.
So would that be talking about accessibility, talking about like reduction in fees, reduction in membership costs or fees to use that
That's
natatorium?
what I think. Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Yeah. That's a good answer. Now you are rather outspokenly religious, I
Yes.
think is an accurate way to put it.
Yes.
How does that inform your approach to governance?
I think that it helps me to be a servant leader from my perspective, is that it helps me to understand that every person and every entity has value. From my perspective, and what works for me is that we all were all made in our Creator's image. And so it helps me to say, even though we have different viewpoints, and even though you may be getting irate and you may be getting upset, it helps me try to look past just what you're doing and try to get an understanding of why you're doing it.
What would you do in a circumstance where, let's say, you have to be the tie-breaking vote on an ordinance, and your religious inclinations are at odds with public opinion on the issue?
Oh. Well, and you asked that question. It's such a vague question.
Sure.
It's going to depend on so many different. I know I know you know this, and so it's going to depend on so many different things. I know that one thing I would not want to do is force my religion down anyone else's throat. I think that everyone has, to a certain degree, their path of what they need to be enlightened, and so it's not my job to try to make you me. That's not my job. Mm-hmm. It's my job to come alongside you and figure out together how we can improve our community.
Let's talk a bit now about the LGBT community.
Mm-hmm.
You were on the city council during the summer of 2023, where there was a lot of outrage regarding Pride celebrations, and much of that was in response to public drag shows, though there was an undercurrent of more general opposition to Pride, at least coming from some of those ways. So what should the LGBT community and their allies expect from the city if you're elected?
I think that your rights as a citizen will be 100% protected.
Is there, I suppose, bounds to that, because a lot of the discussion back in 2023 was on public obscenity. You know, what behavior is or is not acceptable out in public, and that's something that everyone's going to kind of have a different view of where the dividing line is.
Yes, I think that that's something that our citizens have to decide through the city council what they think is acceptable inside their community. And so, but if you're going to have that standard has to be universal for everybody. You know, when I was coming up, one of the things that I like to listen to was rap music. And so if you have a rapper who's coming in town and the community feels as though some of the things that they're trying to put forward, you know, in the public forum, this is something that we don't feel comfortable in our community, the general public, and they voice that through the city council, they have the right to put the ordinances in place that they feel as though protects what they want in our community and stuff.
So per city code, the mayor does have the power to veto certain actions by the council. Now, to my knowledge, Mayor Lou has never used that, at least from what I've seen. Under what circumstances would you consider, if ever, vetoing a piece of legislation from the council?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. I guess if a lot of times maybe I may have information that I've tried to explain and try to get city council to understand and the general public to understand, but maybe I'm privy to something that for some reason or another I cannot share. I don't know what that would be or how that would play out, but if I was privy to something that I thought that they didn't have and that I thought was extremely dangerous for us as a community, then I would do it, but I would do my best to try to explain why that has happened. Yeah.
Is there anything that you can think of that council has passed or nearly passed in recent years that you would have decided to veto?
I don't think so. Nothing stands out in my mind along those lines, but because I really want to respect how we operate as a city council, you know, and I really want to respect that city council has the right to govern. And so it would take a lot for me to go against, you know, what their decisions are. Yeah.
Okay. Just a couple left. I wasn't planning to ask about this, but I did have some people text in about it.
Yes.
Asking about the practice of prayer prior to city council meetings. There are many people who feel that that's something of a violation of separation of church and state. I wanted your take on that.
Yeah, I can see why people are concerned about that. I think that that's something that we have traditionally done, and that's another thing that we sit down as a community as a whole and say, you know, how do we want to be? I think that the mayor should get a feel from the current city councils and say, you know what, if enough of your constituents are saying that this is what they want to do, then the mayor should take it in an advisory and act accordingly to that. I don't think that you want to make a unilateral decision without getting feedback from city council and from the general public, you know, what direction we want to be.
I guess the counter to that is if it's a violation of, you know, the First Amendment, then it's a violation, and it doesn't matter how many people are okay with it.
But it's not actually done as part of the city council meeting. It's not.
Yeah. Last couple.
Yes.
Because we're just about at time, and I do want to ask a couple fun questions.
Okay.
We've seen a dramatic increase in the construction of data centers for new applications like AI and cryptocurrency. Communities with these centers have seen increases in utility prices and pollution. Would you support any ordinance intended to prevent the construction of data centers within city limits?
In order to answer that question, I think the first thing I want to do is say one of the things I love about our community is how well integrated we are in with nature. I love our trails. I love our trees. I love one of the things that for my wife, who's from Kansas City, is in trying to woo her to come and live in. Yeah, that's actually a word people still use, woo. In trying to get her and woo her to come to live in Rolla is that we would go fishing. And she's a city girl, and she'd done some fishing, but she came down here and went to Merrimack Springs and went to some places like behind the center, and she fell in love with fishing. So I really don't want to do anything. I'd be a little hesitant to do anything that I feel as though would be extremely damaging to the natural aspects of who we are. But that being said, you need to get with RMU. You need to understand the capacity of this and this. And so you need to make an educated decision based off what's coming here, based off of how it has been in other communities, and what's the footprint that they've had in those communities, what's been the effect of those communities and stuff. So you can present that material, like I said, to city council so they can make an educated decision. That's what you want to do. You want to do your work. You want to do your due diligence and present the laws so city council can make a decision with the most information they possibly can have, to be informed decision.
Okay. Now, Branson, Missouri recently passed an ordinance partnering their police department with ICE, Immigration Enforcement. This would allow their officers to arrest, without a warrant, anyone the officer believes is in the country unlawfully. Would you support Rolla making such an agreement with ICE? And I guess, because I know it's a hard question to answer, what's your approach? What would your approach be to come to a decision about that?
I don't know enough about ICE and how it should or should not operate with the local government. I really, really don't. And so you want to be careful about saying an overall answer about something because you don't know enough information pertaining to what it is. ICE is relatively new, and so I just don't understand it completely to say a yay or nay. I just don't. But I would be willing to read up and get an understanding and form an opinion when I educate myself. Absolutely.
So you and your opponent, Kevin Greven, have run very positive campaigns thus far, which has been great. And I don't want to jeopardize that. However, I would love, you are running, and so obviously you do think that it would be better for people to vote for you than for him. And so I'd like to hear that reason in the form of a compliment sandwich. So you can share something you think is great about Kevin, why he could be a good mayor, and then that criticism, and then we can cap it off with one more nice thing about Kevin. Does that seem fair?
Yeah. I think Kevin really does a good job of trying to hear from everybody and before he makes his decision. One of the things I think that I bring is that I'm at a stage in my life that, as I said before, I can give a full-time effort. My children are 35 and 31, and that wasn't supposed to be the joke. But they're at that different stage in life. And so I'm at that stage where for the 4 years, I can really invest down, deep dive into this stuff. I've done the coaching. I've done all those things, the running the children around and being drawn in like about 10 different directions and stuff. And so I just think I'm in a different stage in life that I can commit more time to the position. That's what I think is one of the things that stress out. And I have the background, like I said before, is that I know for me, I have the background to ingest complex subject matters and make it portable. And so I think that's really what we need. And I have a history of bringing different people from different perspectives together and helping them understand, all right, let's focus on this core thing of what we're trying to get accomplished. I have a track record of doing that. And so Kevin, on I said the first part of him listening to different people, and I think another part of Kevin is that I love the fact that he's engaged in our community. I think that he coaches wrestling. I think he's a great advocate for our Rolla community, telling people, this is an outstanding community. And so I think he does those things extremely well. And we're blessed to have him in our community.
Great. One of my last questions.
Yes.
I did some research into this. I consulted the Phelps County Historical Society, and I believe it's accurate to say that if elected, you would be Rolla's first black mayor.
Okay.
And race has not been a focal point of the campaign, but I think that's noteworthy, and I'm wondering if that has any significance to you, or any thoughts on that.
Absolutely, it does. Life is full of opportunities to heal and grow and mature and develop. And Rolla has done a lot for me as far as helping me to mature some of my childhood wounds and traumas and whatnot. And so being able to serve in this capacity, I think that it provides not just for myself, but for people to say that you can dream, and you can hope, and you can achieve, and so hopefully someone can say, there are some things that I didn't see in myself, but you know what? Let me look a little deeper. Let me open up my ideal and expand my horizons on what I can and cannot do. I think when I was coming up in Southeast Missouri, I told my family when I was in the 6th grade, I said, I'm going to be an engineer. And in that little farmer community, it's like, you don't even know any engineers, so why would you be saying that you want to be an engineer? But I had that dream of becoming an engineer. And when I came up to school, I gave up a lot of things, and sacrificed a lot of things in order for me to become an engineer. But I liked that idea that somewhere along the line, that dream was planted. And it came to fruition later on. And so I'm hoping the same thing happens with me and being in a non-traditional role, or the first-time role of someone that's saying, like, you know what? I'm going to dream big. I'm going to try, who little girl, little boy, or anyone to say, you know what? I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, we're about at time. One last fun question, because you've been a very good sport. Rolla has a whole lot of festivals and parades, things like PATS, Celebration of Nations, Summerfest. What's your favorite, and why?
Oh, what's my favorite? Now, that's kind of I should say St. Pat's as an alumnus, So yeah. It's almost like a trick question that you asked that. But I don't know why. I'm a Christmas person. So there's something about the Christmas festivities that in our community, and seeing people sing the carols and seeing the little kids just bopping along. And sometimes you have the weather of snow out there. It's something about that season that I really enjoy. And so I think the Christmas parade, and I've learned when we're in the flows to hand the candy out underhanded,
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's something about that Christmas holiday season that I really do enjoy, and how the community comes out and how we celebrate.
All right. Well, hey, before we wrap up, is there anything that we didn't cover that you want the public to know about you? Anything else? Any last words for our folks listening?
I think only thing I want to say is that I think that it's important for anyone who's serving in our community to understand that it's our job to serve you, that this is your government. And so I will be a servant. I will be a leader when I need to be a leader, of course, but I want to hear. And one of the things that I've tried to do throughout my campaign is I've tried to have every entity and every organization and everything I've been a part of has been open to the general public. And I'll continue to do that. You've seen when I've had coffee and chili and different things. And please stop by. Ask me. Give me your input. Tell me what you're thinking. I jokingly said, I think the first event that I had, there were some people that came to the event, and I went over there and talked to them. I said, well, I'm glad that you're out here, and do you feel as though you can support me as a candidate? And they looked me in my face and said, absolutely not. And I said, well, I appreciate you coming out, and I would love to hear your input on where our community can go, and what things we need to address. But that's who I am. Just because we don't agree on things, I don't want you to feel as though you don't have value in the direction we're going. I want you to be a part of our city government.
Right on. And if people are interested in learning more about you, how can they find you?
Primarily Facebook. We have a Lister for Mayor Facebook account.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lister, for this time. Very insightful interview. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. I am over time, so I do apologize for that. Please stick around for the megalomaniacal masquerade with Jester Juice after this. I'll owe him 3 minutes of my show next week. And hey, don't miss my show next week. We'll be talking to Liz Sperry, who is running for City Council in Ward 5. And then make sure you tune in the week after that, because we are going to be talking to Kevin Graven, the other mayoral candidate. So that's going to be March 20th here at 4 p.m. Make sure you tune in, get a full perspective on all the candidates running. Once again, the deadline to file to register to vote is March 11th, and Election Day is April 7th. So thanks for tuning in once again. Thank you, Lister, for being here, and thank you. We will talk to you all. I will talk to you all. Lister won't be here next week here on the Weather Report here on KMNR 89.7 FM, broadcasting out of Rolla. Have a great week.